I've seen a lot of flops throughout the years when it comes to live service launches, but Concord, ladies and gentlemen, this is really, really sad how tepid the launch was. And this is a game that's been worked on for a long time. It came out not too long ago, and if day one launch numbers are any indication, I would say Concord is as good as dead. Right here, ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know what Concord is the launch trailer. It is essentially a hero shooter with a cast of characters, 16 to be precise, 6 PvP modes, 12 maps, and it essentially combines elements of Overwatch and aspects of maybe Destiny PvP with the aesthetic of something along the lines of Guardians of the Galaxy. And it's another live service shooter, hero shooter, that is trying to capture the interest of an audience that has maybe too many options at this stage of live service releases in an oversaturated market. And so they had quite the competition to deal with, but it seemed as though all of the marketing that they've done for this game has ultimately failed to capture the kind of interest that they need to sustain this game. And just a little history on the development studio. This is Firewalk Studios, and they were established in 2018. They were once upon a time a subsidiary of Probably Monsters, and it was founded by former veterans of Bungie and Activision, so they have experience with live service. And it didn't take long before they garnered the attention of Sony Interactive Entertainment, who at the time were very interested in kind of making a big push towards publishing live services en masse. And so according to some of the founders, Sony showed interest very quickly and supported them from the beginning. And so optimistic was Sony about this particular live service that on April 20th, 2023, Sony announced its intentions to acquire Firewalk from Probably Monsters. And they also announced that their upcoming game, which would eventually be known as Concord, would be a collaboration with other PlayStation subsidiaries like Bungie and Haven Studios. And we're talking about a studio, as far as Firewalk is concerned, at the time of acquisition on the part of Sony, we're talking about a studio that employed roughly 150 people. So we're obviously not looking at Bungie level of manpower, but still a sizable enough team to make this a AAA game development that had some potential, but the general feedback is that their game came too little too late and ultimately does very little to stand out from the pack. Its modes, its gameplay, its level design, its progression design, all of these elements, none of them are like exceptionally bad or anything like that, but none of them are outstanding or unique either, or at least unique enough or outstanding enough to really make this something that people will choose over other live services that demand a ton of time and money from them. And so at the time of launch, I mean, this is 697 all-time peak concurrent players on day one is the mark of death. I've not seen numbers this low for a AAA live service launch. And when you compare to other live services that are out there that launched to higher all-time peak numbers and still failed, it further highlights how Concord's fate is sealed at this point. Even Skull and Bones, which recently launched on Steam to very tepid numbers with an all-time peak of 2,600 players as of the publishing of this video, had bigger numbers, and this is still pretty bad numbers right now. It is slowly growing, so we'll see how far this goes, but the launch being, this is a game that's already been released through Ubisoft's launcher, and so the fact that this game that's already been out, that's now launching on Steam, and it's a live service that hasn't garnered, the quadruple A live service that hasn't garnered much in the way of great interest or attention, the fact that this has greater all-time peak concurrent players than the brand new AAA live service from Sony, that already says everything. But beyond that, look at, say, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, whose player base just completely sank and died. But even this game, this live service that has completely and utterly failed, peaked at 13,459 players. That was already not great numbers for a live service. Concord, with an all-time peak number of 697 players, only achieved 5% of the numbers that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League managed to pull. And Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is considered to be a major live service flop. Same thing goes for Redfall, which is a game that flopped so badly that it got Arcane Austin shut down. This game had an all-time peak concurrent player number of 6,124 players. So Concord achieved roughly 10% of that, or like a little more than 10% of these numbers. So Concord is only doing fractions of live services that have failed. So I cannot imagine a multiverse where a Concord has any sort of chance of recovering unless, the support for it and the overhauling of aspects of it becomes so substantial that it somehow makes a miraculous comeback. Even Exoprimal, which has already been shut down, had almost 5,000 all-time peak concurrent players versus Concord's measly almost 700, the 697 all-time peak concurrent players we're seeing here. And this is Sony's big AAA live service push we're talking about here. And I mean, we saw early signs that this game was dead on arrival with the beta, the open beta, that was free to play, whereas Concord, the final release, and this is something that doesn't help its prospects, the final game of Concord is $40. This is not a free-to-play game. If it were free-to-play, I think it would have helped tremendously. But then again, this is not a game that monetizes heavily as some of the others, so they had to sell it at this premium price point. But it's a model that ultimately, I think, because this is a new IP and because it lacks the interest and attention that other far more famous live services have, the $40 price tag is just, it's this wall that a lot of people don't know if it'll be worth investing in and risking, especially because it is a dying live service. And so when you spend $40 on this game, you are putting yourself at risk of having spent that $40 for a game that'll be very temporary. Again, looking at these numbers, it indicates that this live service won't last very long. By spending $40 on this game, you're gambling that it somehow will make a miraculous comeback that Suicide Squad didn't manage to pull off despite having far greater all-time peak concurrent players that were still not great. Even Redfall had greater numbers, and that didn't make a comeback. The fact that it is such a major risk to spend money on this game is further going to detract players. It is such a stark contrast to say what Valve has pulled here. So for those who don't know, Valve is working on this game called Deadlock that they've kind of just put out there, and they haven't really even advertised or promoted. It's only 2 days ago that Valve made it official that they're working on Deadlock. And so this game that has so far gotten no marketing whatsoever, this new Valve live service, has already garnered an all-time peak concurrent players number of 44,512 players, which highlights the kind of the kind of prowess that Valve's name carries. I mean, that the fact that they're working on a new game at all is already kind of miraculous within itself. But yeah, if you go to the Steam page for Deadlock right now, it says that it is early in development with lots of temporary art and experimental gameplay. Access is currently limited to friend invite via our playtesters. There's no planned release date yet. But yeah, developer Valve, publisher Valve. The fact that during a playtest period, this game is seeing those kinds of numbers already highlights that there is a lot of interest surrounding it. And this is a playtest that cannot just be accessed readily. You do have to either get invited by Valve or get invited by a friend who's already in the playtest. So yeah, Concord is just completely falling under the radar. And then if you look at the critical reception surrounding the game, that further doesn't help. I mean, right now there are not that many reviews for the game, but the ones that are out there right now highlight a consistent pattern of critics saying that the game, like, it's not awful, it's just very, like, tepid. It doesn't do anything too special to stand out from the pack. You read some of these concluding or closing arguments and statements and paragraphs, and they all kind of say the same thing. Like, it's hard to justify the $40 price tag for something that feels just not quite as cooked as some of the other live services that have had years to get to where they are right now. They all say that the game's kind of fun, but it's not one that is worth investing the kind of time that live services tend to require. And you're better off playing something else that's a little more fleshed out, that's a little more fun, that does what Concord does, just better. And there's a general sense that this game lacks like a very strong identity. There's a sense that there are aspects of the live service design that leads to lackluster game design and mediocre level design that keep it from being truly great, even if it's fine as a game. Others highlight that there are issues when it comes to the roster balance and characterization of individual fighters. And then here's one that put it very simply: Concord has the bones of a fun multiplayer game, but it's missing the meat. So I hope Sony takes this as something of a learning. Recall that once upon a time, Sony had plans to release 12 live service games by 2025 with the help of Bungie, which was just such an insane goal. And this was back in 2022. So in the span of 3 to 4 years, they were planning to make 12 live services and just put them out there. I mean, that is like competition with yourself. That is shooting yourself in the foot. That's too many live services for one publisher to release out there in a market that's already way oversaturated. Eventually, they had to scale that back because they realized that was just a dumb idea. So on November of 2023, Sony announced that they would launch 6, so half of the 12 live service games by March of 2026, which is still way too many live services to release within the span of just a couple of years in an oversaturated market where launching a live service is incredibly risky. And if it's not a breakout success from the outset with continued growth, then it risks being a financial detriment and something that cannot be maintained for the long term, and being yet another live service that will fall off unceremoniously by the wayside. Concord is Exhibit A of what can happen when you just push a live service out there without much consideration as to what the market is at right now and what the requirements are right now for a live service to stand out from the pack and for it to become a breakout success. And what can happen when you just become reckless with your push for live services and start chasing trends instead of being the one that sets them. So I'm curious to see if Sony will end up backpedaling on this commitment further and will further reduce the number of live services they plan to release by March of 2026. Given the amount of support that Sony has provided to Firewalk Studios, like, this is going to be quite the dent on their financial results and for upcoming investors meetings and the like. And I don't know, I feel for the devs because it does feel like they really tried. You know, I don't get the sense that the game feels like, you know, they just kind of half-assed it. I feel like they really try to make this work, and they worked really hard on this game. And, you know, I always want devs to succeed. I want their endeavors to be something that's well received and garner critical acclaim and, you know, garner commercial success. But this was just not it. And it sucks to say because a lot of people worked very hard on it. It sucks that all the headlines are like this, and to see that nobody's checking this game that they worked years on out. Yeah, like, it sucks, but this is kind of the reality of the live service market, and one that developers and publishers have to always be prepared for. It's a reality that is becoming more frequent. It's becoming more the rule than the exception. The exception is a breakout success for a live service. Your Fortnites and your Destinies and your Apex Legends and your, you know, you name it, any of the current successful live services, those happen once in a blue moon. And when you do hit the mark, there's great revenue potential for sure, which is why companies are, you know, throwing darts until they hit the bullseye. But there are going to be a lot of darts that are going to miss, and they're going to miss pretty hard, and it's going to cost you. And the ones who'll be paying for it are going to be the developers after, you know, studio shutdowns or after mass layoffs over decisions that were not up to them, that was up to leadership that just didn't really think about things thoroughly in the direction that they went for with a video game. Very sad launch for this live service with numbers that are some of the worst I've ever seen. But that's my take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the state of Concord, and if you've played the game, what you think about the game itself, whether you personally are having fun with it or not. Do you see the potential of this game and its growth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.